If today you feel that the soul weighs more than the body, stay with me until the end, because God will transform your tears into joy and your pain into strength. And you are not hearing this by accident. There is a type of weariness that does not appear on the face. It is that which hides behind the polite smile, the automatic good morning, the routine fulfilled without fail. You wake up, resolve everything, answer everyone, manage what is necessary, and no one perceives that inside you no longer know how much longer you will hold firm. Perhaps you know well those nights when the room is in silence, but the head does not stop. The clock advances slowly, the chest tightens, and thoughts begin to walk alone through dark places. Memories that return without asking permission, scenarios that do not yet exist, fears that exaggerate everything, and an uncomfortable sensation of being tired even before sleeping. Many people live this in secret and then rise pretending normality in the morning. There are people who have learned to cry without visible tears. They cry breathing deeply so as not to collapse in front of others, swallowing words so as not to worry anyone, repeating that "I'm fine" when in truth they needed to rest from the weight they carry. If any of this represents you, pay attention. God knows perfectly the battle that no one saw. He understands the language of your silences and has not lost sight of a single difficult dawn. Every sigh you released, trying to keep yourself standing, was heard. That anguish hidden behind a casual conversation did not go unnoticed. Even when you felt that the sky was silent, there was a work moving in places that your eyes could not yet reach to see. God's answers do not always arrive making noise. In many situations, they begin in the invisible and later transform the visible. The Bible is full of people who crossed similar seasons. Joseph dreamed before being sold. David was anointed before hiding in caves. Hannah wept before embracing the miracle. None of them understood everything while they suffered, but later they discovered that certain tears did not announce an end, but rather preparation for a greater stage. And I perceive something happening while you listen. There is a restlessness within you that is not common, a sensation that this message arrived at a moment too specific. Perhaps you have felt this other times, a tightness in the chest without reason, a desire to cry that comes from nowhere, an impression that something needs to change but you do not know what. This is not weakness. It is your spirit recognizing that there is something greater than your eyes can see. And it is this type of awakening that separates those who merely listen from those who act. Many pass through this moment and let it escape. Few understand that when the soul becomes restless like this, there is a spiritual responsibility wanting to be born. It could be the protection of your family. It could be a mission you have not yet understood. It could be that God is preparing you for something that will demand a firmer faith than the one you have today. That was why I prepared the powerful digital book for you, How to Know If God Will Save You in the Final Judgment. This material was created for those who feel this calling but do not know how to respond, for those who want to understand what their own life has shown, and for those who need spiritual direction in this phase. The link is in the description of the video and at the top of the comments. Thousands of people have already accessed it and returned saying that something truly changed, that they began to see things previously hidden, and that their faith gained depth. This content may go offline at any moment. If you feel that this message is for you, do not ignore what your heart is saying now. Comment the word Amen as a seal of this commitment to your transformation. Now keep this in the deepest part of your heart. You were not born to live permanently in sadness. You were not created to always drag the same weight. The words of God continue announcing restoration, new paths, and renewed strengths for those who decide not to let go in the middle of the process. Perhaps today it is difficult to believe because the waiting wears one down. When a person has already prayed several times for the same thing, when they desired changes that continue to delay, and when the routine continues demanding strengths that seem exhausted, even hope can become tired. But the fact of being tired does not mean it is over. The longest night still has a reserved dawn. While you thought you were merely surviving, something inside you began to strengthen. The sensitivity that was born from pain can transform into wisdom to choose better. The patience developed in this phase will tomorrow be stability. Even certain disappointments that today weigh heavy maybe delivering you from paths that further ahead would hurt much more. Do not underestimate what this process has already produced. Today, you recognize better what steals your peace. You know how to value the authentic more than before. You understand the wounds of others with a compassion that perhaps did not exist before. You look at life with new depth. None of this was born by chance. If these words touched what you have been feeling, help me by leaving your like, because another person may be fighting a silent battle and needs to find this message. And subscribe to the channel so as not to miss any word. Now remain attentive, because many people are unaware that certain tears appear precisely before a great turn. What weighs today will not stay forever, and in the next few minutes you will understand why God's answer may be closer than you imagine. I know that this question has lived inside you for a long time. Can my story really change, or is it already too late? This doubt arises when weariness is prolonged, when frustrated attempts weigh too much, or when the heart has grown accustomed to expecting little so as not to be disappointed. But today I announce a powerful truth. God does not only want to alleviate your pain, He wants to return your capacity to believe with peace. The promise over your life is not simply to survive. It would be too small. Heaven works on something deeper, to transform what hurt into a source of fortitude, to convert the season that exhausted into wisdom, to use what seemed like ruin as the base of a new construction. This changes the way of looking at the past, because nothing that was lived needs to end in defeat. And here enters the struggle you face every day between trusting and fearing, between resting and controlling, between believing and doubting. This battle has a turning point, and it is not when circumstances change. It is when you change the way you position yourself before them. That was why I prepared the powerful digital book for you, How to Know If God Will Save You in the Final Judgment. The link is in the description and at the top of the comments. Do not leave for later what your spirit asks for now. The promise you just received gains a different depth when we observe a story from the Bible that seems written for those who feel delay, injustice, and accumulated weariness. I speak of Joseph, a man who received great dreams from God, and shortly after began to walk through scenes that seemed to deny everything that was promised. The most impressive thing is that what seemed like a contradiction ended up being preparation. Joseph saw the future before knowing rejection. He heard words of honor before feeling the weight of betrayal. He looked forward with hope and, almost without time to understand, was surrounded by the envy of his own brothers. Those who should have rejoiced for his destiny were bothered by the light he carried. This continues to happen. Some people tolerate your wounds, but they become restless when they discover that you still have hope. The decisive day arrived. They called Joseph to the field, and he certainly walked thinking it would be an ordinary day. But he ended up facing one of the hardest scenes of his story. They surrounded him, took off his tunic, and threw him into an empty cistern. Imagine this instant. Stone walls, heavy air, echo all around, and voices moving away up there, while the soul tries to understand how the expected love turned into abandonment. Nothing hurts in the same way when it comes from where you expected care. A close betrayal leaves questions that take time to heal. Perhaps you know something similar. Perhaps it was not a literal pit, but a painful disappointment, an unjust word, a phase where those who most should have sustained you moved away when you needed it most. In a human view, all seemed lost. A dreamer inside a cistern does not seem like someone close to their purpose. But God continued present where no one saw a future. The darkness of a season does not prove divine absence. Often heaven works with more precision, precisely in the chapters where the person thinks everything has stopped. Afterward, Joseph was sold and taken to Egypt. What seemed like ruin began to transform into strategic displacement. He had no way of knowing, but he was being moved to the scenario where later a decisive door would open. How many people weep over changes that they later understand as direction? In Potiphar's house, another silent phase began. Joseph served with excellence in tasks that on the outside seemed small for someone with such great dreams. While he organized day-to-day matters, God was developing administration in him. By obeying under authority, leadership was born. By resolving simple details, the mind was formed that one day would sustain enormous decisions. This speaks to you. Perhaps today you repeat discreet routines, face modest responsibilities, or cross journeys where nothing seems extraordinary. Do not despise this season. Silent trainings later sustain immense opportunities, and when it seemed that stability finally arrived, an even harder trial came. Potiphar's wife tried to drag him into error. Joseph chose integrity and ended up unjustly accused. Doing the right thing does not always generate immediate reward. Sometimes obeying costs first and is understood later. Imagine him entering prison with a clean conscience and a wounded heart. It would be easy to fill oneself with bitterness. But Joseph made an extraordinary decision, not to allow injustice to define his identity. It is possible to cross a wound without becoming a wounded person forever. One can suffer rejection without becoming someone cold. Pain touches real chapters, but it does not have automatic permission to write the whole story. In jail, Joseph continued serving. He helped others while waiting for help for himself. He heard others' problems while having his own. He maintained disposition when many would have lost all sensitivity. This reveals genuine spiritual maturity. When a person blesses while healing, it shows that the wound did not manage to dominate the center of the heart. If during the wait you let it steal your tenderness, the wear has taken too much. Protect your interior while you wait, because the right blessing needs to find a healthy version of you. The years passed, and on the outside it seemed that nothing changed, but the determined moment arrived. An unexpected call took Joseph out of prison. In a few hours he spoke before Pharaoh and entered a new season. What took years to prepare manifested suddenly. Thus God acts. Long processes flow into swift turns when the time is ripe. Do not measure your story only by the visible today. And look at the most beautiful part. When Joseph had before him those who had wounded him, he did not speak through vengeance, he spoke through understanding. He recognized that what was intended for evil ended up directed for good. This phrase does not deny the pain. It reveals that evil did not have the last word. The betrayal suffered has no authority to name your future. A painful loss does not decide the end of your story. Old errors can become the soil of wisdom when God enters with mercy. Write in the comments, "I am ready for my new phase." Sometimes putting hope into words helps the soul remember that a future still exists. And now pay close attention, because what comes next can change forever the way you interpret the silence of heaven. Perhaps you carry a question that almost never comes out in public. If God loves me, why does he keep silence precisely now when I need it most? This restlessness is not born of rebellion. It is born of exhaustion. Many imagine that the presence of God always manifests with clear signs and rapid solutions. But the Bible reveals a deeper truth. There are seasons where divine love works without noise, and therefore it is hard to recognize it at the beginning. Not everything sacred enters with a crash. Some of the most decisive works of heaven begin far from applause, out of sight, in places where only the attentive heart perceives movement. Think of a seed under the earth. From above it seems still. He who looks only at the surface concludes that nothing is happening. But underneath a silent revolution occurs. The shell opens, the root seeks depth, and life organizes itself in secret. The invisible usually contains the most important change. While the person thinks everything has stopped, perhaps roots are being born that later sustain taller seasons. When the answer delays, it does not always mean absence. Often it indicates preparation. Certain pauses that cause despair may be preventing something from arriving too early to hands still wounded. The Bible repeats this pattern. Moses spent years in the desert before guiding a nation. David knew caves before the throne. Jesus lived decades of silent preparation before publicly initiating his ministry. Between promise and fulfillment, there usually exists a stretch where God strengthens character and expands interior capacity. And here appears the truth that transforms. The silence of God does not always mean that he has stopped speaking. Sometimes it means he is teaching you to listen in another way. When everything goes as you imagined, trusting seems easy. With abundant signs, anyone smiles. But when there are no visible certainties and even so you remain, faith ceases to depend on mood and begins to become deep. Perhaps in this season you have learned to pray with less appearance and more sincerity. Perhaps you have proven that hope still breathed inside you after heavy nights. These discreet changes do not generate headlines, but they represent real growth. If today you feel that God is silent, try changing a question. Instead of, "Why do you not answer?" say, "Lord, what are you forming in me in this phase?" This interior turn opens a different door, because it transforms frustration into seeking and anxiety into spiritual sensitivity. And pay attention, because this silence connects with a battle that happens every morning and wears out too many people. It does not happen in a visible field. It happens inside the mind, in the way of interpreting what comes. There are people who wake up and before putting their foot on the ground have already surrendered their peace to stress and to concerns that have not even happened yet. The way you begin the morning dictates the emotional tone of the entire day. If anxiety is the first thing you receive, it will run inside even with the body still. Therefore, faith was not given only for services. The words of God were delivered for the tiring Monday, for the bill to pay, for the difficult decision, for the heavy traffic, and for the journey where everything demands too much at the same time. There, in the everyday, spirituality becomes practical strength. Imagine a different morning. Before taking the cell phone, before seeing a message, you decide to give a few minutes to the soul. Breathe deeply, recognize the presence of God and say, "Lord, accompany me today. Guard my mind, order my steps, and give me peace to face whatever comes." It seems small, but it changes the interior atmosphere. This gesture reminds the heart that it does not walk alone, and it is worth understanding something essential. Not everything deserves your immediate reaction. There are words launched by others that want to drag you into disorder. Comments born from others' wounds try to install themselves in your mood. Spiritual maturity is also knowing what to ignore. Keeping silence at the right time avoids entire storms. Breathing before speaking saves relationships. Choosing calm when others choose chaos reveals strength that does not need a spectacle. The presence of God does not always arrive in dramatic scenes. Often it enters in the details of daily life. A kind word at the right time avoids an unnecessary wound. Listening truly heals more than a long sermon. Asking for forgiveness early prevents pride from raising walls difficult to tear down. Blessing the environment where you live transforms the atmosphere more than it seems. If your house carries tension, begin sowing peace where before you sowed defense. Lower the tone when others raise it. Set limits with firmness without falling into hardness. True fortitude does not need violence to be noticed. Emotional healing also demands concrete action. Not everything is resolved with a beautiful phrase. There are relationships that need a clear limit. There are environments that it is proper to abandon to return to breathing. Certain wounds ask for honest conversations, and some weariness only improves when you learn to rest without guilt. God heals, yes, but often He does this by guiding mature decisions. Take care of what feeds your interior. If you fill the mind only with comparison and negative voices, then do not be surprised when anxiety grows. The soul needs truth, healthy silence, and gratitude. You do not need a perfect life to feel the presence of God. You need an available life. He enters into common routines, strengthens tired people, and transforms normal days into deep growth. And while learning to walk thus, you discover something even more powerful. The pain that almost defeated you can become a testimony capable of lifting others. When a person begins to heal, they discover that their story was not destined only to survive, but also to raise people up. There are pains that seemed useless until they became a bridge, nights so dark that the person did not understand the meaning while crossing, but that later became the reason why someone found a way out. This happens constantly here on the channel. Messages arrive from people who were at the limit. Among them there was one that remained recorded. Marcos wrote, "I was on the verge of giving up on everything. When I found this channel, something inside me said, 'Listen,' and from there I began to leave that darkness. Stop for an instant and feel what exists behind this confession. It is not someone speaking who only had a bad week. It is a man speaking who reached a point where pain blurred the future and the heart began to believe there was no way out. Many people know this place and never tell. They continue working, answering messages, smiling when necessary, and inside they sustain a fierce battle that no one sees. But when it seemed that darkness had taken too much ground, an unexpected crack appeared. It did not arrive in a spectacle. It manifested in the simplest and most powerful way. a word from God at the necessary moment. He heard within himself a single word: listen. God does not always burst in shaking everything. Often he approaches as a soft voice that touches the interior with delicacy. There began Marcos's turn. A single, intimate instant was enough for an exhausted heart to change direction. Deep restoration rarely begins with fireworks. It looks more like the dawn. Almost no one perceives when it initiates because it enters slowly. But a few minutes pass, and the entire sky is already full of clarity. Marcos confirmed that even when someone thinks they have gone too far in pain, God still opens paths back. Elijah wanted to give up under a tree and received food and direction. Peter fell deeply before being restored with love. No human night was longer than the mercy of God. If this is your case, receive this truth. If God reached Marcos in such a dark hour, he knows how to reach you where you are. His story can now lift others. His words perhaps reach hearts that he will never know. This is what God does with pain in his hands. A useless wound becomes a bridge for those who find no way out. Therefore, perhaps you continue here after all you lived, not only to say that you resisted, but because your story still holds a greater purpose. If you reached this moment, it was not out of curiosity. Something inside you needed to breathe. It needed to hear a truth greater than the weariness. Remaining until here says much about your heart, because he who seeks light in the middle of the struggle shows that faith has not died. Perhaps you began feeling a weight in the chest, accelerated thoughts, questions without answer. But something moved inside you. Circumstances perhaps have not changed completely, but your interior is no longer in the same place. This matters deeply. I invite you to stop for a few seconds. Release the body. Take the tension from the shoulders. Breathe calmly. Give the soul an instant of rest while receiving this blessing. Beloved Father, look with tenderness at the person who listens now. You know their name, the complete story, the tears that no one saw, and the burdens they carried without knowing how to explain. Approach with mercy every corner where there was sadness, fear, or exhaustion, and pour out peace so real that it breaks every sensation of abandonment. Bring clarity to confused thoughts and rest to the tired mind. Visit this chest where pressure accumulated. Touch memories that still hurt. Begin deep emotional healing where the wound seemed old but continued speaking in secret. Return serenity to those who grew accustomed to living on alert. Blow new strengths over those who thought they could no longer go on. Renew energies spent by difficult nights. Return enthusiasm to projects extinguished by weariness. Open windows where the environment was suffocating. Bring provision where there is need and wisdom where it is lacking to decide. Bless what lies ahead. May the coming days arrive with more peace than weight. Permit right encounters, healthy conversations, and news that bring relief. Grant light mornings after dense nights. If something needs to end, grant courage to let go without bitterness. If the right door is closed, prepare mature hands to receive. Where there was shame, establish dignity. If insecurity spoke for years, plant serene confidence. In the spaces where sadness seemed a habit, make true gratitude and the will to live sprout. Break the power of every interior lie that repeated that it was already too late or that nothing would change. The words of God continue saying more strongly, there is still a future, there is still a purpose, there is still beauty possible in what seemed ruined. This message did not reach you by chance. Every word that touched your heart today is part of something that God builds in your life. You heard about Joseph, about the silence that is preparation, about the daily battle that is won from the inside out. Everything connects with the exact moment you live. That was why I prepared the powerful digital book for you, How to Know If God Will Save You in the Final Judgment. This material gathers what you need to take the next spiritual step with firmness. The link is in the description of the video and at the top of the comments. Do not wait for the perfect moment. The moment is now. If this message meant something, comment, I receive as a mark that today you made a spiritual choice. Share with someone who needs to hear, because your obedience in sharing may be the answer that another person asks of God at this exact moment. Keep this truth in the deepest part of the soul. Your tears were not the end of your story. They were water over earth that soon shows fruit. The pain did not come to give you a name. It came to teach you how much God can strengthen you. The difficult phase will not define what comes. It only prepared the ground for the wisest, firmest, and most luminous version of you. Thank you for having stayed until the end. When you need to breathe, find direction, or remember that hope exists, here there will be a word waiting for you. Rest, close your eyes with tranquility, and carry this certainty as you sleep. The best of your story can still begin.